I'm really excited to be here today. It's been interesting. I've been thinking ever since I found out that I was going to get to do this. I've been kind of thinking about what I was going to say, and you have this one word to talk on, and it's kind of a buzzword that I've heard a lot over the past 5 years, I guess, or so. So it's something I have some thoughts on, I guess. I'm going to have 3 occurrences of some adult language, the F word, throughout this speech. So be prepared for that. That is fun, fun, fun. And that's what I want us to have here, if we can do that. Somehow I did this speech. I wrote it relatively fast in the midst of looking up a lot of rap lyrics. So we'll see how it comes out. Never been able to speak for this long before. So I'm going to kind of talk about what we do, what my background is, the types of projects that we do, the materials that we use in our processes. And I'm going to talk about how I feel like reuse plays into that, and then also the reuse of ideas. I'm going to speak kind of from the perspective of like what I know about woodworking and woodworking business, which is what I know how we do it. That's the only kind of real authority I have on that. There's definitely, we have our shop is our way, and the way that we do woodworking is kind of our way, and so that's my authority that I can speak from on that. In general, I feel like reuse is kind of more of a necessity in most parts of the world. It's either a necessity or a luxury is how we treat it, I think, because most people, when I think of people reusing things, it's because there's not materials available, like more of kind of like a third world type situation. When we reuse materials, it's usually more of a luxury or kind of a feeling that we're trying to get to. And I think that most people that are reusing are probably not invited to speak about reusing. So I think that we might be more in like kind of a luxury category, but we'll get to that more later. I think my best ability probably is kind of collecting and rearranging ideas. That's how I approach any kind of a craft or art. It's very personal to me. That's just part of me. That's not like work or something that I force myself to do. It's just I'm constantly collecting ideas and looking at analyzing how things were built or the thought process that went into something. My interests in that are pretty broad. I'm very interested in architecture, sculpture, poetry, hip-hop, folk art, all kinds of stuff, So, but when I get into something, I get into it, and I get into it kind of thoroughly. I've always kind of worked with my hands. I got into this when I was about 15 years old. And then I worked in metalworking shops, woodworking shops, until I went to college for the first time. And I dropped out of college to build this house for a builder who had seen some of the things I was building. He was like, "Why don't you build our whole house?" And I was like, "All right." And we did it. And we had, so it was really interesting. This was 7 years ago, and we used pretty much all the finishes in the house were reclaimed materials and some of the structural parts. And it was kind of a good introduction to reusing materials. And of course, we did it at that time thinking we'll do this house will be so cheap because we're going to find all of this, old metal and old wood and stuff like that. And it didn't end up working out like that. But, which seems to be a consistent thing with reusing materials. But that was kind of my big, that was my first big project. And then from there I went back to I got some real training in restoration carpentry. And then eventually started the shop. So I went to art school for a couple of years after I started the shop. And I think there I got a respect for a lot of different types of materials. Certainly not, wood is not the thing that I'm always the most interested in, but it is what, we're set up to work with. And I left art school after about 2 years, because I already had the shop going. I knew I was just going to get right into it. And I actually had a professor who told me, he was like, why are you even doing this? You should just go out and just get to work. And he tells a lot of his students to quit school, I think. And I think it's actually good. I think in that situation, I think it's good advice. But that's a whole different topic. So kind of in my influences, as far as furniture goes, I really like a lot of the Danish designers. I like shaker furniture from America a lot. And then I also like Googie architecture a lot from the 50s, which had a very short period of time that it was around. But that's Epcot is very Googie architecture. Coffee shops and diners, and it had this very short-lived time period, but I love it because it was very interesting, its own thing. I like Rococo architecture, and just because it's so weird and ornate. So I I've got that split of the simplicity of the Shakers and the Danes, and then Danes, wow, and then the Rococo, Googie, this absurd aesthetic. Art Nouveau is kind of in there too. So, but basically, I strip that down to I like two things in design: simplicity and the function of something, or that Rococo complexity and extravagance, which we've done in places like the Imperial, where it's just you just kind of try to get it as weird as you can, sort of. With our projects, I think we're known a lot for working with reclaimed and local wood, and that's where I started for sure. That's where I started, especially because I had a good relationship with a local mill that I continue to use, and we just had so many different types of species that were available to us that we just couldn't get anywhere, and they're really interesting. And so it really started more with the material than with the sustainability green type movement. But I continue to use a lot of local reclaimed woods. We have really good sources for it. We get some really wild reclaimed stuff off of barns and old buildings and stuff like that. But the qualm with it is making something consistent, because it's always getting materials can be difficult, and you only have 400 board feet of something available at a time, or 500, or whatever. You can, especially if we have to do large projects like paneling or something like that, where you need large quantities of material. But there's kind of three ways we get reclaimed material when we use it. We have salvaged materials from the the St. Johns River, which is river cypress, river pine. There's stuff that comes from old barns, and then there's local materials that usually are kind of trees that are urban trees that are destined for to go to the landfill. They get chopped down. They get mulched usually. Sometimes they get burnt, but that's where like all of our local material comes from. It's material that would have gone to the landfill from land clearing projects or small tree removals, and it ends up at the mill, and we get it cut down. Building with reclaimed materials, well, wood's very suited to be reused as a material. I don't know anything about glass or steel, how that's recycled, but I know with wood, there's like the oldest piece of wood that is not petrified that is in existence. There's a wood collector that has it, and it still can be milled just the same as like this piece of southern yellow pine that was probably cut within the year. So it's very as long as it is not, it's very suited to be reused. It's shaped, worked the same way, know how old it is. As it gets older, it becomes more stable because wood is always kind of like a living, breathing sort of a thing. With the reclaimed material, we do it on, we build these boxes for Rifle Paper Company. It's like a recipe book card box. And the material, we always try to get them to make them out of walnut because we hate the staining and cleaning up the reclaimed wood process. There's just a lot. You have to work with it in a different way. You have to start from a different point. The wood comes in with, sometimes it has nails in it. Sometimes it has bug damage, sometimes which can be very difficult to get out of the finished product. It just takes a lot more time on our side. Usually like when we get this big lot of, it's like, I think we order like 1,000 board feet at a time for that job. And so it's this big stack of lumber. And the first thing we do is we get in the racks and we cut out all the rot, and then we take a wire wheel on a grinder to every surface to get all the voids taken care of so that they can go through the machine cleanly and hit solid wood. So it's not necessarily, like I say, we always try to get them to use walnut because then we stain it after that, and we stain it to look kind of like walnut, which we usually don't really do much staining, but the process would be a lot easier on us if we just used walnut. And I think it would look nicer. But it's not even though all the species that we use for that are really beautiful and the boxes look great and everything, it's just not, it's not a reclaimed product. And that's fine. It's just using that type of material it's not a means to quick production, or it's not a cheap route or anything like that. It's a more difficult process. The second thing about reusing materials that I really like is in another job that we've done a couple of, which is for the Imperial Bar, and which John is here, the owner of the Imperial, which I was stoked to see. But we've done, what was cool about that was we've done 2 of them, so I think John trusts us pretty much to like walk around his inventory and just take whatever we want and start cutting away at it and building stuff out of it. But the thing that I like about that job is that it provides parameters, which is something that I like as a designer. When you have, this is what our needs are, this is what the space is, these are the things we have to build it out of. As opposed to, you can do whatever you want, which is what every art student wants, but you never want to give an art student, you can do whatever you want, because it's going to be really shitty. You have to get I continue to enjoy the parameters. You have to earn, I think, the ability to do whatever you want for somebody that you're working for. But those parameters, just the sizes of the specific boxes that we're using and how things go together, it sparks all these ideas of well, this is this giant pile of things that I have. And some of them are statues, and some of them are pieces of furniture, and some of them are just parts and pieces of all kinds of things. And you get you start to see how you can kind of combine them together. And that's something Craig, our shop manager, and I work really we work really well together. I think we've worked long enough together, and we have like a similar idea about things to where it's I think we're good at that. We kind of anticipate what the other one is thinking probably. So I'm going to get more into what else I think about reusing materials that are here from kind of an environmental perspective, which I have absolutely no authority to talk on except for the fact that I use materials that are considered environmentally friendly. But as far as from a scientific perspective or what's going on in the broader spectrum of the world, I have no authority to speak on that. But this is what I know about this. I don't have a lot of illusions about reusing our materials as having an effect on the environment at large because the basic business processes are the same. The basic processes of building a cabinet or a piece of furniture, whether it's out of 200-year-old reclaimed English walnut or something, or out of cherry, that was milled here. It's exactly the same. You still have to go to the store, pick up the lumber. Your guys have to come in their trucks. You are using the internet, which uses like electricity, I think, and that, it's like, and you ship it somewhere. It's literally the amount of time and material spent, or the amount that's spent on that material, the effect that it would have is so minuscule. I don't think that it's something, but I don't think that it's something that's worth like really bragging about. Which is why I've always been more interested in just the material itself and the history of the material. In the United States, we have, at least with certain types of forests, we have just the same amount of forested land as we did about 100 years ago. Our forests are managed very well, from what I understand, with softwoods. Our hardwoods we're losing. So like, we're not replanting walnut and cherry at the same rate, but we plant southern yellow pine like crazy, you know what I mean? But they're managed to be harvested on, I think, a 30-year cycle, which is different than like in Europe where they harvest on a 300-year cycle. So so they can only harvest 1/300th of a forest per year, and then it gets replanted and stuff like that. So our hardwoods we have some issues with in this country. Most of the hardwoods that we get from smaller mills that kind of do the same process. Like we get a walnut tree that comes from North Carolina. It's a lot of times it's like fallen, same things like urban development projects where there's like land clearing or just one or two stands of trees that needed to be taken down. What we are growing, what is different with our forests that we have now, is like this is 2 trees. These are just 2 boards that I got out of the shop. This is both framing lumber, both southern yellow pine. This is a 2x4 that we just had in the racks that we were probably using for any kind of a shop use. This is a piece of reclaimed southern yellow pine that came out of a rafter in a house. And both basically have the same use. This was probably milled and kiln dried very rapidly within the past year. And the house was torn down, I think, a few years ago, and then it was built like in 1906. So this was cut down, 100 years ago. So this was basically virgin timber when it was cut down. And so you can just tell when you look at the difference of the growth rings on them, the difference of the tree. And you can actually feel the weight. Same species. You're never going to find a tree like this in the United States anymore that has this type of growth rings And we're not even really close to the center of the tree on this. This is like, you can see, this is the center of the pine tree here. So I'm just going to pass these around because this is always really fascinating to me. It's one of the amazing things about reclaiming materials is that this old antique piece of southern yellow pine is so strong and it's so stable, it's where it wants to be. The modern piece is not very stable and it's not nearly as strong. But you're never going to find this again until you get it out of an old building. So I'm going to just pass these around. The other thing about materials on this that I was thinking about is I kind of wonder sometimes if disposable is better long term than because like I have like a love-hate like relationship with IKEA a little bit because like their furniture is really shitty. You buy it to like, you know, move into some place with somebody and then have a falling out and then get rid of all your furniture and then do that over and over again. So it's like you never like, it doesn't, that's what happens with IKEA furniture. But if we were to build a IKEA piece, we couldn't even buy the material to build that piece of furniture for the price they sell the finished piece at. So we can't buy the MDF and the particle board and all of that. And particle board and MDF and plywood is like an incredible use of materials because it's completely efficient. There's some binders in there that are an issue, like what they use to glue the pieces together. But it's extremely efficient. When you use like solid lumber to build a piece of furniture, you're using less than 50% of that tree that was forested by the time you get your finished piece with doing all of your, you know, scrap cutting and cutting over to length and your milling and everything like that. With plywood and with particle board, that stuff's just, everything goes into it. So I'm a big fan of our modern materials that have been around like for, you know, about 100 years. We've had those types of materials available to us. But I wonder if it is sometimes better from an environmental perspective is disposable better. It doesn't last as long, but the process is way more efficient than like going to a small furniture maker, and it's way cheaper. I'm not trying to get anybody to not come to a small furniture maker, but I'm just saying, like, just know that that these are luxury items in a lot of ways. Maybe not even luxury items, but don't treat them as, or I don't intend to treat them as being anything more than what they are, which is something that I delight in and love doing. The Made in America movement and the green movement that's been around for a while, I think one of my qualms with it is that like reuse of materials doesn't connotate good design or good use of materials. Good design is a result of seeing things in a certain way and an accumulation of your experience. There's my dogs back there. We have a where my dog's at joke at the shop, and they're laughing at me for some reason. But it's an accumulation of experience and execution for that experience. Good design is not about your material selection. That's just part of the process. So when we have these kind of like companies that we're all involved in, or a lot of us are involved in this movement of where we're trying to get back to made in America and simpler things and responsible use of materials. But I think we're disguising these things as necessity that are not actually a necessity, or we're calling them things that they aren't, which is exactly what everybody wanted to get away from when they wanted to get away from things like Kmart and McDonald's and Walmart. But we use the same marketing methods. And I don't think that is sustainable, because I don't think that the products are sustainable on the demand side. We're starting to get these insane like requests for for products that are made to look simpler and made to, harken back to the days of the Great Depression and everything like that, when everybody was happy. And it doesn't, and these products, they don't make any sense in the sense of we don't need to. I'm thinking of one product very specifically that somebody talked to me about building last week, which I'm not going to mention, but there's no reason to try to call something that it's not. I think, which is why I've never really played into like the green thing or the local thing or the Made in America thing, because I would rather see us just do something that we're good at and that we like to do because we like to do it and we're good at it, rather than try to throw on other stuff to validate us. So I think in that I don't like the idea of overhyping where your ability is or what you're about. And that's where I feel like this Made in America green movement is at in a lot of ways. So that's my gripe on that. On the upside, I think the other thing that I think a lot about in reuse, when I thought of the word reuse, is the reuse of ideas and where our ideas come from. Like I said earlier, I think my best skill is like, in my own mind, like compiling, selecting, and kind of filtering through ideas. And I've always wanted to work in that realm that's a little bit more conceptual, which is why I like the fine arts, I think, because I think in craft, you can't really say much through craft. You can do good work, but in fine arts, you can discuss, you can kind of participate in that global conversation. I don't think most of our work does that yet right now, but I think that's what I pay attention to, is what the ideas are behind things, the intentions. So I see patterns, I see themes in things, I notice kind of like value in things I was talking about earlier, like, architecture, different styles of furniture, the ways people write, how well people do at public speaking. So I like this idea, this ebb and flow of ideas where somebody puts something into the world and they did it this way, and somebody else looks at that and they draw from that and they do it this way, and there's this constant call and response sort of a situation that's going on. I like that, like at the Imperial, like, when we're taking something that was built by somebody who I have no connection with, who I will never meet, who will never meet me, but I'm using something that he built in a way, and I can see kind of maybe what he was thinking about when he did something like this, or when he did this repair, and you're like, oh, I wouldn't have done that like that, or what a novel idea, or whatever it is. But it's this constant, and then you're doing something else with it. And I like that being able to, you're using your experiences to build a collage, basically, of different work. And I think that flow of ideas is really interesting, and seeing what other people are doing throughout the world. It really amazes me how many people are doing interesting things and how many people are talented and able to do all kinds of different creative things. And we see those things, we're interested in them, we grab onto them. I think the danger comes when if you try to reproduce or copy, where credit is not due, or where you try to pass something off as your own, or where you're trying to do something for the sake of being unique. I don't think we should worry about staying in the current. We should be engaged with what is currently happening, but we shouldn't try to do something just to be in that flow, because your work is not going to be very, very good. Like something like, we've been doing some stuff with plants lately, and plants are really hot right now. I don't really know anything about plants, but I had this idea for some planters and some art installation pieces I want to do with plants, and I would never have thought of that except for the fact that I keep seeing all these different designers making like wall-hanging plants and these living walls and all kinds of situations that are really interesting that I would have never thought about had I not kind of seen what's currently going on. But to just try, the danger is when you try to copy things just for the sake of copying them because you think that it'll make you cool or something like that. Not because you think it'll sell, because it's good to sell, but you don't want to be cool selling. So in that, I think we're not as unique as we think we are, because everybody has great ideas, and there's a lot of great ideas and a lot of very able people. And I like the idea more of people interacting with other people's ideas and owning that than trying to be like, I'm some, island unto myself as a designer or a creator, because nobody is, and eventually you just kind of become kind of like an arrogant asshole if you do that, I think. So I think the dark side of reusing ideas becomes when we start to copy things, and when things begin to look like Baldwin Park. I hope nobody designed Baldwin Park. Actually, I don't give a shit, because that's what we're talking about here. So, but like, there's like it's like we're hearkening to. I like the idea behind like this is this planned community that is laid out in this certain way, and that's awesome. To where that it's very thoughtful about how this is done. But the idea of copying a copy of another thing or another building really blows my mind. And like I think like we're in an area that does this a lot. I don't know if it's just because of like Disney World but Disney World is its own thing because it's kind of claiming to be Disney World. You go there knowing like this is this fantasy environment. But like this, we're on our like third or fourth Mediterranean revival in the area. And that blows my mind because we have no connection to the Mediterranean, and they don't look like Mediterranean houses. And I think that it's not unique. It's not its own thing. It's copying a copy, and that's what people want. But I think that's the downside of reusing ideas that are not your own. Which leads me to think that I think my favorite era right now in our recent history is the 80s, which I hate the 80s. But I like this idea that, like, you look at the 80s, and nothing in the 80s was trying to copy anything, really. It was like we love primary colors and hot colors, and then, all these, crazy straight lines and angular things and giant shoulder pads. And obviously these ideas did come from other places, but it wasn't like where we're at now, where everything's supposed to be everything's supposed to look like it came out of East of Eden. Make sure there's not like some picture of yeah, we don't look like we came out of East of Eden. But yeah, it's like inauthentic. It's just like this searching for this identity. And I think that will stagnate. So the bottom line, the 80s was where it's at, I think. And we do this a lot, though. Like, we've been doing this. We're still, there's still cabinet companies out there that they specialize in, we distress furniture, and they have, a bucket of chains and a bucket of nails and stuff like that they throw onto the cabinet doors. And it always looks goofy to me because, which I started out doing a lot of that stuff. And I got to where I was pretty good at it. And I could replicate things pretty well. And I don't do that anymore because I kind of think this way now. But it interests me because, all of those cabinets are, not because you took, a perfectly good cabinet and you destroyed it or something like that, but because it's it's inauthentic. It's an inauthentic way of working. It's trying to achieve something that you didn't really achieve, or make something into something that it wasn't. And I think all of those pieces of distressed cabinetry and stuff are going to get ripped out of these houses in the next 10 years or so. But I don't know, we did it in the 70s too. They fly-specced everything, and there was all kinds of, you see the all holes in some of our American-made furniture from then. So I don't know if this came out more negative than I wanted it to, but I think my bottom line, I think, is that I think we should definitely treat design for what it is. We shouldn't call it anything that it's not. We shouldn't give it any more glory than it needs. It can't, it can't save your soul. It can't really change your inner life or anything like that. And so I think we play to a lot of that with this mystique and this nostalgia that we build up around our products, whether that's somebody that only buys American-made stuff off the internet, or if that's somebody that, will only buy affliction stuff, you know what I mean? And it's the same kind of, we just need to kind of call it what it is. That's all that design can provide. It's something that we can delight in. It's something that can help us organize our life better. It's something that we can enjoy the process of, and that we can relate to other people in, but it's not something that we shouldn't buy into the marketing ploys about anything that's any kind of a product necessarily that will claim to do more than it can. So, in closing, I told you about what we do, about our processes, and my thoughts on the reuse of ideas and materials. And I think everything kind of boils down to us using less, owning less, and buying less, kind of needing less, but still being thoughtful about what we have, or what we buy and how we buy it. And I wanted to read a quote from Patrick Moore, who was one of the founding members of Greenpeace, about reusing trees and trees as a material. When he was asked about the relationship between people, trees, and the environment, Moore explained, "Some assert that we should cut fewer trees and use less wood to save the forest. I believe that is incorrect. In fact, it is anti-environmental, because when you use less wood, you automatically use more steel, concrete, and plastic. And the manufacture of these non-renewable resources are part of the cause of CO2 emissions in the first place." Moore continues, "So my belief is the correct policy could best be summed up as grow more trees and use more wood." And I agree with that. So, believe we were questions and answers. Is that what's next?
Yeah, we have time for it.
All right, cool. And again, thanks for having me out. This was kind of it was a good thing for me to think about and get my, it was a good focusing exercise on thinking about what we're doing as a group of people, what I'm interested in, and what I'm trying to do with the work that I do. So it was a good focusing thing for me. So I was glad for the opportunity. Yes.
What did the name come from, Hog Eat Hog?
What did the name come from? Let's see. I like play on words. I like play on word jokes, I guess. I like animals. It kind of but I didn't come up with this one. So my ex-wife came up with it, and which is why I laughed, because that's kind of funny that's existing still. But yeah, that's what it came from, and I love animals and words, so that's where it stuck. So.
That's all we got.
Yes.
First off, congratulations on surviving your trial by fire in terms of public speaking here. The question that I've got is, obviously you've been influenced by other architects in your learning here. Frank Lloyd Wright, for instance, believed in using the materials in the environment when he was designing his stuff there, and I think I see some of his influence in some of the designs that you've done there. It's the wall sconces that you did.
Mm-hmm.
It's looked to have some influence from him. The question that I have is, do you feel okay in being influenced by previous folks like that without considering yourself copying them? I know that you were concerned that influence would turn to copying.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I love Frank Lloyd Wright, and a lot of times when I go to design something, I would go pick up the Frank Lloyd Wright book off the shelf. I don't like his furniture, but I do love his buildings. So yeah, I don't think I'm I don't ever like copy anything that he'll do, but a lot of times I'll sit there and I'll be like, or I'm not going to like copy something specifically, like say, this is something Frank Lloyd Wright did, and I'm going to make this exactly like this. But what I like to do is something like get out the scale and see like what was he doing dimensionally there, like what were his proportions that he was using, and then I'll apply that to something. I mean, I have like in my head, I have the proportions that I like, and like ratios. That's as far as I get in mathematics too. Is like I have like my rules about ratios, and like if something is this wide, then it should be this long, or if it's and some of that's based on kind of conventional wisdom, and some of that's based on you see some of those ratios stretch, like in the modern period of architecture, and I like long things that are long and low and layered. So. Yeah, I don't. As long as you're not like copying something and calling it your own, but like we did a big built-in not too long ago that had it's like a prairie style built-in, and we did a lot of the details they were my own kind of designs, but they were very prairie influenced, which was very Japanese influenced, which is it's so yeah, I don't. I hope so. Yeah. Yes.
So, you use a lot of reused materials. What about reused tools? As far as, do you find that, the older tools that in a lot of the photos, do you find that gives you an advantage, or do you
yeah.
think it lends itself to the style that you're trying to achieve?
That's funny. That's kind of like we have a lot of tools in the shop. We have a lot of tools in the shop that we don't even use. It's a source of conversation amongst us a lot of times. I'm kind of the opinion now, just because of my experiences with it, I kind of like buying newer machinery instead of buying. We've had most of our machinery is used, and most of them have issues because of that. And so we've had to work the kinks out of those issues, and that wastes a lot of time and a lot of money. Hand tool wise, like I actually almost brought your Lie-Nielsen block plane, and then my Stanley one that I use, that it's based off of. And so the Stanley one that I have is I don't know how old that thing is, probably 30s maybe, something like that. And the Lie-Nielsen is based off that same design. And the Lie-Nielsen one is new, and it is miles ahead better than the other. The steel is better, it's heavier, it's built better. There's a lot of things like that you see with hand tools and stuff like that. Machinery is a little bit different, but you're not going to be, like if you get industrial, like that machine era, like 1930s woodworking equipment, like first of all, getting it to your shop is going to be a nightmare because it's all cast iron and everything. But nobody makes machines like that anymore, that's for sure. They're just massive and giant machines. So So I kind of am of the mind more so like staying away from used equipment and machinery, and just because we've had troubles with it. And also like trying to find a complete set of like, a complete set of old chisels or something like that, and spending the time to tune them up and spending it's great and it's nostalgic, and we have a lot of them and we have our go-tos that we use, but I think it's hard to outfit a shop like that. Yes. Yeah, sure.
Sorry. So you talked a lot about delighting
Uh-huh.
in kind of the design and the process, which I loved. And you kind of also talked about how people sort of like maybe want this other thing, like Baldwin Park, and I do Baldwin Park too.
I don't hate it. I just,
I
yeah.
kind of go through there and I feel like I'm in the Truman Show. But like,
Right, yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
But I guess I'm just wondering, and maybe this is more philosophical, but what do you think prevents people from kind of delighting in it and wanting something that is unique or genuine or?
I don't know. Like, I don't know. I mean, I know how I do it. I don't know what, I always wonder, like, I know several architects that had not real well, but know people who've gone to school at like, to UF, which has a, really well-known architecture program. And from what I understand, they're really like very model-based and very hands-on and everything. And I have my uncle runs Rural Studio in Alabama, which is the architecture program at Auburn. And, they have these, I don't know what happens to like people after they come out of that a lot of times. I know the ones that I know that like went to UF, like a lot of them are stuck doing things, like very, very uninteresting things in the interiors of hospitals and stuff, and they don't really enjoy it. I don't know. I mean, I think partly you have to just kind of like do what you do what you're good at, and just like stick to it and just keep hammering away at it. And if you go, I assume, you don't get to, I don't know much about architecture, like how the process is, besides for like the end result, but like it takes a long time to get to be top dog before you're making like real design decisions that are being cutting edge. I'm assuming from what I understand. I keep looking over at Ryan because he's an architect, so I'm looking to see like if he's saying that's such bullshit, or maybe I don't know. So, but yeah, like I think that was where I chose. It was like, this is what we do, this is how we do it, and like this is what we're gonna do. So like we don't copy designs, we don't do, and so that provides us with that space to be, this is kind of how it is, take it or leave it, which I think I got from, there's a lot of other people that are around here that are like that, like Mama's Sauce, the print shop is like that, and I think that's where that was a good lesson for me to see that being enacted, So I guess I think part of that freedom that I have to design the way that I design is that people come to me expecting that. Nobody ever gives me a call saying, can you build this, this Chippendale cabinet or something, because they know that, I guess, that's not what we do. So, yeah. Oh, can I do one more question? Yeah. You had a question
I was
about.
wondering if you could talk a little bit about your creative process, whether it's someone comes to you with parameters for a design or if you're doing artwork on your own.
Usually it's something like somebody will come and say something like, I need a table, and they'll give me like the size of the table that they want, and I'll give them material selections, and then I sketch something, and usually my sketches are pretty loose. I'm getting more and more detailed. I have to now, because I can't just sell off like a basic sketch anymore. So like, because usually it's like, oh, I know how I'm going to do this. Like, this is what it's going to look like, and I'll figure it out. But that was when I was working by myself. You can't really do that when you have other people working with you, because it creates tons of problems when they, when you assume that they know something that wasn't notated in the design. So, so I usually they come to me with just a need, and then I kind of fill it in with something I've already been thinking about, or a way that I've been, or a previous design that I've had that I've been wanting to build. I have like stacks and stacks of drawings and designs for things that I'm like, this would be this would be a great production table, you know, which is where we want to go, is more production and less custom. More insane custom, but less like, and more production as far as sustaining us. So that, so I have a lot of designs, you know, that I've never built, but I think you have to be, you know, you have to have, like, for every 100 designs that you have, maybe one gets built or something like that. I think that's just part of the process, whether you're like a graphic designer or an architect or, you know, filmmaker or anything like that. So, so that's usually how the creative process goes with me. It's usually something I try to pull from something I've already been thinking about or something that's current to me. Somebody came to me the other day for this wall sculpture mural thing, and I've been thinking a lot about like plants and how like how they could exist as a wall sculpture. So it made sense to pitch that to him. So that's kind of how I work with that.
Well, if you guys got time,